I never thought my perfect wedding day would turn into the most shocking moment of my life. But sometimes, the universe has a way of testing you when you least expect it. I'm standing at the altar in my dream dress, looking into the eyes of the man I thought I'd spend forever with, when suddenly his ex-girlfriend stands up in the middle of our ceremony and announces to everyone that he texted her the night before, saying he still loves her. The entire church went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. But here's the thing that nobody saw coming, including my husband-to-be. I had already checked his phone the night before, and what I found wasn't what she claimed at all. What happened next shocked every single person in that church, including me. Hi, everyone. I'm Iris Caldwell, and I'm a 28-year-old elementary school teacher from Portland. This is the story of how my wedding day almost got destroyed by my husband's manipulative ex-girlfriend, and how I turned what could have been the worst day of my life into proof that I was marrying exactly the right person. The man I was about to marry is Declan Hayes. He's 30, works as a landscape architect, and honestly, he's the kindest, most genuine person I've ever met. We've been together for 2 years, and I thought I knew everything about him. I thought we had no secrets between us. I was wrong about that, but not in the way you might think. The woman who tried to destroy our wedding is Paige Sterling, though everyone calls her Piper. She's 29, runs her own event planning business, and used to date Declan about 3 years ago before she moved to Denver. I had always felt completely secure about their past relationship because Declan talked about her the same way he talked about any old friend. There was no lingering emotion, no weird tension, nothing that made me feel threatened. My support system that day included my amazing sister, Wren, who was my maid of honor and has always had my back no matter what. Declan's brother, Nolan, was his best man, and my parents, Vincent and Rose, were sitting in the front row, probably more nervous than I was. We had 160 people there to celebrate with us, including my Uncle River, who works as a park ranger and has this incredibly calming presence that always makes me feel safe. I'm telling you this story because what happened taught me something incredible about trust, intuition, and the power of staying calm under pressure. It also taught me that sometimes the people who try to hurt you end up proving exactly why you made the right choices in the first place. What you're about to hear is going to make you angry, probably make you gasp out loud, and hopefully make you cheer by the end. Because while Piper thought she was going to ruin the happiest day of my life, she actually ended up making it even more perfect than I could have imagined. This wedding story has more twists than a roller coaster, and I promise you the ending is worth every uncomfortable moment we had to go through to get there. The crazy part is that none of this would have happened if I hadn't followed my gut instinct the night before the wedding. You know that feeling when something just doesn't feel right, even when you can't put your finger on what it is? That's exactly what saved my marriage before it even officially began. As a teacher, I've learned to trust those instincts because kids can't hide when something's bothering them, and apparently neither can grown adults who are being harassed by their exes. I had no idea that checking Declan's phone that night would prepare me for the most dramatic moment of my entire life. I had no idea that Piper was planning to humiliate me in front of everyone I love. And I definitely had no idea that I was about to give the performance of my lifetime in front of 160 wedding guests who thought they were just there to watch us say our vows. But sometimes life throws you curveballs that test everything you believe about yourself and the people you love. Sometimes those tests happen at the worst possible moment, in front of everyone who matters to you. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, those tests prove that you're stronger than you ever imagined and that you chose the right person to stand by your side through anything. This is that story. Declan and I met 2 years ago at a community garden volunteer day, and I swear it was like something out of a romantic movie. I was there with my 3rd grade class teaching them about plants and how food grows, and he was redesigning the entire space for free because he believed everyone deserved access to beautiful, functional green spaces. I remember watching him explain to the kids how certain plants help each other grow better when they're planted together, and thinking that this guy gets it. He understands that everything is connected. What started as a casual conversation about soil composition turned into him walking me and my students through his design plans, showing them where the butterfly garden would go and how the new pathways would make the space wheelchair accessible. The kids were fascinated, but honestly, I was more fascinated by how patient and genuine he was with them. You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat children, and Declan treated every single one of my students like their questions and ideas mattered. We started dating a few weeks later, and everything just felt natural. Our first real date was a camping trip to the Oregon coast, where we spent hours talking around the campfire about our dreams and values. He told me about his vision for sustainable landscape design that helps communities connect with nature. I told him about my goal to become a principal someday so I could create learning environments where every kid feels valued. We discovered we both volunteer at the local animal shelter on weekends. We both believe in supporting local farmers markets, and we both think the best adventures happen when you're willing to get a little dirty hiking off the beaten path. The proposal happened 8 months ago at the Portland Japanese Garden, which had become our special place for weekend morning walks. Declan had somehow convinced the garden staff to let him plant my favorite wildflowers in a hidden corner of the grounds, arranged to spell out "Marry Me" in tiny purple and yellow blooms. When I saw it, I started crying before he even got down on one knee. He'd also crafted our engagement ring himself, a simple band with a small diamond he'd inherited from his grandmother, set in wood from a tree that had fallen in our favorite camping spot. Throughout our entire relationship, Declan had been completely open about his dating history, including his 3-year relationship with Piper, that ended when she decided to move to Denver to start her luxury event planning business. The way he talked about her was always matter-of-fact and respectful, like you talk about a former co-worker you got along with, but don't really keep in touch with anymore. He'd even recommended her services to his cousin who was planning a wedding in Colorado, which made me feel secure that there were no lingering feelings or awkwardness between them. Planning our wedding was honestly the most fun I'd ever had organizing anything. We chose a beautiful riverside venue about 30 minutes outside Portland because we both love being near water, and the sound of the flowing river reminded us of our camping adventures together. Declan insisted on making our wedding rings himself, spending weeks in his friend's woodworking shop crafting matching bands from reclaimed Oregon oak. I found my dress at a little boutique in the Pearl District, a simple but elegant design that felt like me, not like someone I was trying to be for one day. My mom let me borrow her vintage lace veil, the same one she'd worn when she married my dad 32 years ago. Ren and I spent hours planning the perfect playlist that would represent our journey together, from the folk songs we sang around campfires to the indie rock we played while cooking dinner together. We decided to write our own vows, and Declan being Declan, he hand-lettered and illustrated mine on handmade paper that looked like something from a fairy tale. The week leading up to the wedding was exactly what you'd expect. I was nervous and excited and couldn't sleep properly because my mind kept racing through all the details. Declan seemed a little more stressed than usual, but I figured that was normal. He's the type of person who wants everything to be perfect, and he'd been putting extra pressure on himself to make sure our day was everything we'd dreamed of. The rehearsal dinner was at my parents' house. Just close family and the wedding party gathered around their big dining room table, sharing stories and laughing until our stomachs hurt. Declan seemed quieter than usual during dinner, stepping outside a few times to take what he said were calls from his groomsmen who were nervous about their speeches. I didn't think much of it at the time because Nolan had been texting him all week about forgetting his speech notes, and Declan's college friends have always been the type to overthink everything. Looking back now, I realize those weren't calls from nervous groomsmen at all. Our wedding morning started exactly how I'd always imagined it would. I woke up in my childhood bedroom surrounded by my bridesmaids, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains my mom had hung when I was 12. Ren was already awake, making coffee and arranging the flowers we'd picked up the day before. My college roommate Jade was doing her makeup in the mirror, and my cousin Mara was hanging our dresses carefully by the window. Everything felt magical and perfect. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock at Riverside Gardens, this gorgeous venue where the Willamette River curves through towering Douglas firs. We'd chosen the late afternoon timing because the golden hour light would be hitting the water just as we said our vows. I'd been dreaming about that moment for months, imagining how romantic it would look in our photos. The morning flew by in a blur of hair appointments, final dress fittings, and excited chatter from the bridesmaids. My mom kept tearing up every time she looked at me, telling everyone who would listen how proud she was and how perfect Declan was for me. My dad spent most of the morning pacing around the house, clearly emotional but trying to hide it behind jokes about gaining a son and losing his little girl. Around noon, we loaded up Ren's SUV with all our wedding gear and headed to the venue for photos and final setup. The space looked absolutely breathtaking. The ceremony area was set up under a natural canopy of tree branches, with white chairs arranged in perfect rows facing a simple wooden arch that Declan had built himself. Strings of warm lights were woven through the trees, and mason jars filled with wildflowers marked each row. The river provided the most beautiful natural soundtrack, and I could already picture our guests enjoying cocktails on the lawn after the ceremony. But about an hour before the ceremony was supposed to start, I began noticing things that made my stomach feel unsettled. Declan seemed distracted and kept checking his phone more frequently than usual. When I asked him about it, he said Nolan was having last-minute panic about his best man speech and needed reassurance. That seemed reasonable enough, but something about Declan's body language felt off. He kept looking toward the parking area like he was expecting someone, and when I mentioned it, he brushed it off, saying he was just excited to see all our friends and family arriving. Then I noticed a woman I didn't recognize talking to some of our guests near the registration table. She was tall, blonde, and wearing a striking emerald green dress that was definitely more formal than most of our guests were dressed. She looked confident and polished in a way that seemed almost out of place at our casual outdoor wedding. When I asked Ren if she knew who the woman was, Ren squinted across the lawn and shook her head, saying she'd never seen her before. I tried to push down the weird feeling creeping up my spine. Weddings always have a few unexpected guests, people who know someone, plus ones you've never met before. I told myself I was just being paranoid because of pre-wedding nerves. But my teacher instincts were kicking in, the same ones that tell me when a student is lying about their homework or when something's wrong in my classroom, even when I can't pinpoint exactly what it is. About 20 minutes before the ceremony, I was in the bridal suite touching up my lipstick when I heard raised voices outside. Through the window, I could see Declan talking intensely with someone just out of my line of sight. His posture was tense, and he kept running his hands through his hair the way he does when he's really stressed or upset. I'd never seen him look that agitated before, not even during the most stressful parts of wedding planning. Nolan appeared and seemed to be mediating whatever conversation was happening. After a few more minutes, Declan walked back toward the main venue area, but he looked shaken. When I caught his eye through the window, he gave me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and a thumbs up, but I could tell something had rattled him. 5 minutes before we were supposed to start, Ren came into the bridal suite looking concerned. She said the mystery woman in the green dress had asked several guests about seating arrangements and whether she should sit with Declan's family or friends. When people asked how she knew us, she'd been vague, just saying she was connected to the groom. Ren's protective sister instincts were clearly activated, but there wasn't time to investigate further because the music was starting and everyone was taking their places. As I took my dad's arm and prepared to walk down the aisle, I decided to trust that whatever was bothering Declan, we'd handle it together after we were married. I had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, I'd be facing the biggest test of our relationship in front of everyone we loved. While everyone in that church expected me to either burst into tears or immediately demand to see Declan's phone, I did something that surprised even myself. I stayed completely calm, not because I'm some kind of superhuman who doesn't feel emotions, but because something had clicked into place the moment Piper made her announcement. All those little warning signs from the night before suddenly made perfect sense. The truth is, I had suspected something was off during the rehearsal dinner. Declan kept stepping away to take phone calls that he claimed were from nervous groomsmen, but his body language told a completely different story. After teaching 8-year-olds for 5 years, you develop a pretty reliable radar for when someone isn't being completely honest with you. Kids can't hide their emotions very well, and apparently, neither can adults who are being harassed by their exes. When we got back to my parents' house after the rehearsal dinner, Declan seemed restless and distracted. He kept checking his phone and acting jumpy every time it buzzed with a notification. He said he was just excited about the wedding and couldn't settle down, but I'd never seen him like that before. Declan is usually the calmest person in any room, the type who can handle any crisis with steady hands and a clear head. Around 11 o'clock, Declan stepped outside to take another call, saying it was Nolan having a panic attack about his speech. But through the kitchen window, I could see him pacing back and forth in my parents' backyard, and his posture looked tense and frustrated, rather than supportive and reassuring. When he came back inside, he seemed even more agitated than before. That's when my instincts really started screaming at me. I've learned to trust those feelings because they've never steered me wrong, whether it's sensing that a student is being bullied or knowing that a parent isn't telling me the whole truth about why their child is struggling. Something was definitely not right, and I needed to know what it was before I walked down the aisle the next day. When Declan went to take a shower, I did something I'd never done before in our entire relationship. I checked his phone. My hands were actually shaking as I picked it up from the nightstand, because violating someone's privacy goes against everything I believe in. But the alternative was walking into our wedding with this terrible feeling that I was missing something important. What I found wasn't what I was expecting at all. There were no love messages or romantic conversations with another woman. Instead, I found a long thread of increasingly desperate messages from Piper that had been going on for almost 2 weeks. She was begging Declan to call off the wedding, saying she'd made the biggest mistake of her life when she chose her career over their relationship, and pleading with him to give her another chance. The messages were honestly painful to read. Piper was pouring her heart out, telling Declan that she'd been miserable in Denver, that her business success meant nothing without him, and that she'd been planning to come back to Portland anyway. She said she'd heard about our engagement through mutual friends and realized she couldn't let him marry someone else without fighting for him first. But what made me feel proud rather than threatened was reading Declan's responses. He was firm, consistent, and completely loyal to me in every single message. He told Piper that he was sorry she was unhappy, but that chapter of his life was completely closed. He said he was deeply in love with me and excited to start our married life together. When she kept pushing, he became more direct, telling her that her messages were inappropriate and that she needed to respect his decision. The final exchange happened the night of our rehearsal dinner. Piper had sent him a long message saying that if he went through with the wedding, he'd regret it for the rest of his life, and that she was prepared to do whatever it took to make him see reason. Declan's response was crystal clear. "Stop contacting me immediately. I'm marrying the woman I love tomorrow, and nothing you say or do will change that. Do not contact me again." Instead of feeling betrayed by Declan, I felt incredibly proud of how he'd handled the situation. He'd tried to protect me from Piper's harassment while being completely faithful to our relationship. The only thing that bothered me was that he'd been dealing with this stress alone instead of telling me about it. But Piper's final message had been ominous. She'd written back saying that if he wouldn't listen to reason, maybe his bride-to-be would. That's when I realized she might actually show up at our wedding to cause trouble. So I made a decision that night. Instead of confronting Declan and adding to his stress, I took screenshots of the entire conversation and prepared myself for whatever Piper might try to pull. The silence in that church was deafening. 160 people holding their breath, waiting to see how this drama would unfold. I could feel every eye in the room on me, expecting me to fall apart or demand to see Declan's phone immediately. My parents looked horrified in the front row. Ren was gripping my arm like she was ready to physically fight someone, and poor Declan looked like he might actually be sick. But instead of doing what everyone expected, I reached into my small bridal purse with the calmest movements I could manage. My teacher voice kicked in, the same tone I use when I need to handle a classroom crisis, with 28 pairs of little eyes watching my every move. Clear, authoritative, and completely in control. "I already checked his phone," I announced, and my voice carried perfectly across the silent venue. You could have heard a pin drop. I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. "In fact, I checked it last night." The gasps from the congregation were audible now. This was clearly not what anyone had expected, including Piper, whose confident smirk was starting to falter around the edges. Declan's face went from panic to confusion to something that looked like amazement as he realized what I was about to do. "You're claiming that Declan told you he still loves you and that marrying me would be a mistake," I continued, looking directly at Piper while addressing the entire room. because what I found when I looked at his phone was him telling you repeatedly to stop contacting him and that he was marrying the woman he loves, me. I turned my phone around so the guests in the front rows could see the screenshots I'd taken. Would you like me to read his actual messages out loud, Piper? Because I saved them all. The color was draining from Piper's face now, but she was clearly committed to her story. Those aren't the messages I'm talking about, she said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. He sent me different ones, private ones. Really? I said, and I could feel my confidence growing with every word. Because according to what I can see here, his last message to you was sent at 11:43 last night, and it says, and I quote, "Stop contacting me immediately. I'm marrying the woman I love tomorrow, and nothing you say or do will change that. Do not contact me again." The murmurs from our guests were getting louder now, and I could see people turning to look at Piper with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disapproval. Our officiant, Pastor Williams, looked completely bewildered, but was clearly trying to figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. "That's not what he really feels," Piper insisted, but she was starting to look desperate now instead of confident. "He's just saying that because he thinks he has to. Deep down, he knows we belong together." That's when Declan finally found his voice. "Piper, stop," he said firmly, turning to face her directly. "Iris is absolutely right. I've been telling you for 2 weeks to leave us alone. I never gave you any reason to think I wanted to get back together with you." He turned back to me, and the look on his face was pure relief mixed with overwhelming love. "Iris, I should have told you she was harassing me, but I thought I could handle it myself. I didn't want to stress you out during our wedding week. I'm so sorry you had to deal with this at all." I handed my phone to Pastor Williams, who looked at the screenshots with raised eyebrows before clearing his throat. "Well," he said in his calm, measured way, "it appears there's been some confusion here. Based on what I can see, the groom's messages are quite clear about his intentions and feelings." The atmosphere in the room was shifting now. What had started as shocked silence was turning into murmurs of support for us and clear disapproval of Piper's behavior. I could see my Uncle River making his way toward the back of the venue, his park ranger instincts telling him this situation needed to be managed before it got any worse. "Piper," I said, and my voice was still calm but now carried a note of finality. "I think it's time for you to leave. You've made your feelings clear, Declan has made his feelings clear, and now I'm making mine clear. This is our wedding day, and you're not welcome here." The guests actually started applauding, not just polite wedding clapping, but real supportive applause that showed exactly whose side they were on. Piper looked around the room, finally realizing that her grand gesture had completely backfired, and that she was now the villain in a story where she'd expected to be the romantic heroine. Uncle River reached her row just as she grabbed her purse and headed for the exit, her emerald dress flowing behind her as she made what had to be the most humiliating walk of shame in wedding history. The moment Uncle River escorted Piper out of the venue, something magical happened. The entire atmosphere shifted from tense drama to pure celebration. Our guests erupted in genuine applause, not just for getting rid of the disruption, but for how Declan and I had handled the situation together. Pastor Williams waited for the noise to die down, then looked at us with this huge grin and said, "Well, I think you two just proved you can handle anything life throws at you. Should we get you married now?" The laughter that rippled through the crowd was warm and joyful, washing away the last traces of awkwardness from Piper's dramatic exit. Declan took my hands and looked into my eyes with this expression of complete awe and gratitude. "I can't believe you knew all along," he whispered. "I can't believe you protected us like that." "We're a team," I whispered back. "That's what teams do." The rest of our ceremony was absolutely perfect, and honestly, even more meaningful because of what we'd just been through together. When Pastor Williams asked if there were any other objections, the entire congregation burst out laughing. Our vows felt deeper somehow, like we were promising to face the future knowing we'd already proven we could handle unexpected challenges with grace and trust. Our first dance was magical. The DJ played our song while fairy lights twinkled overhead and the river provided the most romantic soundtrack. Declan kept telling me how proud he was of how I'd handled everything, and how sorry he was for not telling me about Piper's harassment sooner. I told him I understood why he'd tried to protect me, but that from now on, we face everything together, no matter how uncomfortable or stressful it might be. The reception turned into the most fun party I've ever been to. Everyone kept coming up to us throughout the night, telling us how impressed they were with how we'd handled the situation. My dad gave a speech about how proud he was of the strong woman I'd become and how he knew Declan was the right man for me because of how he'd stayed faithful even when being pressured by someone from his past. Nolan's best man speech was hilarious. He admitted that he'd known about Piper's messages because Declan had been stressed about them all week, but he'd respected Declan's decision to handle it privately. He said watching me pull out those screenshots was like watching a superhero reveal their secret power, and that he'd never been more sure that his brother had found his perfect match. Our honeymoon in New Zealand was incredible, and it felt even more special because we'd started our marriage by proving we could communicate and trust each other completely. We spent 2 weeks hiking through the most beautiful landscapes I've ever seen, and every single day felt like a celebration of what we'd built together. The best part was realizing that Piper's attempt to sabotage our wedding had actually made our relationship stronger. We learned that we could handle crisis situations as a team, that we trusted each other's judgment completely, and that we were both willing to protect what we'd built together. About 6 months after the wedding, we heard through mutual friends that Piper had moved back to Colorado and was working with a therapist on understanding healthy boundaries in relationships. I actually felt relieved to hear that because I'd never wanted to see her hurt. I just wanted her to respect our choices and find her own happiness somewhere else. Looking back now, a year later, I'm actually grateful for what happened. Not because I enjoyed the drama or wanted to be publicly embarrassed on my wedding day, but because it showed me exactly who I married and exactly what we were capable of handling together. It also taught me to always trust my instincts, even when it means doing something uncomfortable like checking someone's phone. Our marriage has been everything I dreamed it would be, and more. We bought a house with a huge garden where Declan designs beautiful outdoor spaces and I grow vegetables for my classroom cooking projects. We're talking about starting a family soon, and I know our kids will grow up seeing what it looks like when two people face challenges together with honesty and respect. The wedding photos are beautiful, including the candid shots our photographer captured right after Piper left. You can see the pure relief and joy on our faces, and the way our families rallied around us. Those pictures remind me that love always wins when it's real and when it's protected by people who genuinely care about each other. If you enjoyed this story of wedding drama with a satisfying ending, please hit the like button and share it with anyone who needs to hear that trusting your instincts and communicating honestly can turn even the worst situations into proof that you're with the right person. Subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about relationships, teaching, and learning to trust yourself when life gets complicated. Thanks for listening, and remember that sometimes the biggest challenges reveal the strongest foundations.